In the wizarding world, there are organizations, and then there are organizations you don't even know exist. Everyone's heard of the Order of the Phoenix and the Death Eaters, but beyond those names are even more hidden alliances, secret councils, and groups so confidential they'd make the Unspeakables, well, speak. Today, we're peeling back every enchanted layer to expose the organizations that shaped magical history from the shadows. From Dumbledore's underground resistance to Voldemort's private cult, and a few obscure ones that sound like they were invented after one too many butterbeers. This is every secret organization in Harry Potter Explained. The Order of the Phoenix. The Order of the Phoenix is the wizarding world equivalent of the Rebel Alliance. It was a secret organization founded by Albus Dumbledore during the First Wizarding War to oppose Lord Voldemort and his Death Eaters. It was reformed when Voldemort returned to power. Unlike the Ministry of Magic, which preferred denial and paperwork, the Order actually did something useful, protecting targets, gathering intelligence, and countering dark activity. The Order's first headquarters was Dumbledore's own office, later moving to number 12, Grimmauld Place, which was hidden using the Fidelius charm. Members included some of the most capable witches and wizards of the time: Minerva McGonagall, Remus Lupin, Alistair Moody, Nymphadora Tonks, Kingsley Shacklebolt, Sirius Black, and of course, Molly and Arthur Weasley. During the Second War, even Harry, Ron, and Hermione joined their efforts. It wasn't a large organization, but it was fiercely loyal and completely independent from the Ministry, mainly because the Ministry was too busy pretending the war didn't exist. The Order's secrecy, bravery, and reliance on trust set it apart from anything else in the wizarding world. The Death Eaters. The Death Eaters were Lord Voldemort's private army, his most loyal servants, and the primary force behind both wizarding wars. The group's origins trace back to Tom Riddle's time at Hogwarts, where he began recruiting a select few students who shared his obsession with blood purity and power. These early followers, and we'll get to those later, would eventually evolve into the Death Eaters once Voldemort shed his human identity and embraced his new title. Their mark of loyalty was literal. The dark mark was a tattoo of a skull and a snake burned into their left forearms, which could be used by Voldemort to summon them instantly. Many were influential figures who maintained respectable public lives. Lucius Malfoy as a ministry lobbyist, Augustus Rookwood as a spy inside the Department of Mysteries, and Igor Karkaroff as a headmaster abroad. Some, like Bellatrix Lestrange and Antonin Dolohov, were fanatical killers who treated the Dark Lord's orders like divine commandments. Others joined out of fear rather than belief. Meetings were held in remote manors and forest clearings, with Voldemort's snake, Nagini, often coiled nearby. Because nothing says team spirit like a giant venomous familiar watching you grovel. The Death Eaters operated through assassination, terror, and infiltration. Even after Voldemort's first fall, their influence lingered in the Ministry and wizarding aristocracy, protected by bribes, family names, and conveniently imperious alibis. During the Second Wizarding War, they reemerged stronger than before, armed with inside connections, ministry control, and a terrifying efficiency that made the Order of the Phoenix look like a student club, like our next entry. Dumbledore's Army, the DA. Dumbledore's Army began as a rebellious student organization during Dolores Umbridge's regime at Hogwarts in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. When the Ministry banned practical defense against the dark arts lessons, Hermione Granger proposed that students secretly learn from Harry, who had first-hand experience facing dark wizards. The name Dumbledore's Army was intentionally provocative. It mocked the Ministry's paranoia that Dumbledore was raising a private army to overthrow them. For the group's first meeting, the group of Hogwarts students traveled to the Hogshead Inn in Hogsmeade. The choice of venue wasn't accidental. Aberforth's pub had a secret passage into Hogwarts via a hidden tunnel, which later became a key escape route during the Battle of Hogwarts. Membership included students from every house, except Slytherin. To be fair, several Slytherins later sympathized from a distance once the Carrows took over. The group met in the Room of Requirement, which transformed into a full combat classroom equipped with cushions, training dummies, and a fireplace. Hermione enchanted a fake galleon for each member that changed its serial number to show meeting times, a clever communication method inspired by the Death Eaters' dark marks, but far less sinister. Members like Neville Longbottom, Luna Lovegood, and Ginny Weasley emerged as natural leaders when Harry was away hunting Horcruxes. During Voldemort's occupation of Hogwarts, the DA evolved into an underground resistance cell, sabotaging the Carrows' control and protecting younger students. Their final act came during the Battle of Hogwarts, when the DA reunited through the same enchanted galleons to fight alongside the Order and the rest of the Defenders. The DA may have started as a handful of teenagers with a secret password, but it grew into a genuine resistance network that carried the same spirit as the Order itself. Proof that you don't need a wand license or an office at the Ministry to fight tyranny. Just a bunch of disposable child soldiers. The Unspeakables. Department of Mysteries. The Unspeakables are the most secretive employees in the entire Ministry of Magic, working within the Department of Mysteries, an underground complex so classified that even senior ministry officials have no idea what goes on inside. Their entire purpose is to study the fundamental forces of existence: time, thought, love, death, and space. Each of these concepts is given its own chamber, guarded by enchantments that can drive intruders insane or erase them from existence altogether. According to Dumbledore, the love chamber is kept locked at all times. No one outside the department knows how many Unspeakables there are, what their names are, or even what spells they use. They take unbreakable oaths of silence about their research. Some have theorized they perform magical experiments bordering on alchemy, necromancy, and time manipulation. The infamous time turners, used briefly by Hermione Granger in Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, were prototypes developed and destroyed within this department. Likely because meddling with time caused temporal instability, which is wizarding code for the universe almost exploded. One of the most mysterious rooms is the Death Chamber, containing the Veil, a tattered archway whispering with the voices of the dead. Another, the Hall of Prophecy, stores millions of fragile orbs containing predictions, one of which foretold Harry and Voldemort's connection. During the Battle of the Department of Mysteries, the Order and DA fought Death Eaters here, causing several prophecies to shatter and much of the department's work to be lost. Interestingly, Augustus Rookwood, one of Voldemort's spies, was an Unspeakable before defecting, suggesting that the unbreakable Oath of Silence wasn't quite so unbreakable after all. Some theories suggest the Unspeakables were partly inspired by ancient secret magical orders that studied forbidden knowledge, though this has never been confirmed. In the wizarding world, if you ask an Unspeakable what they do, they won't tell you. Not because they're rude, but because they're not exactly sure. The Knights of Walpurgis. Before the Death Eaters struck fear across Britain, there were the Knights of Walpurgis, an elite clique formed by Tom Riddle during his time at Hogwarts. The name, a nod to Walpurgis Night, a European festival historically associated with witchcraft and dark rituals, was chosen deliberately. It sounded respectable enough to fool professors, yet hinted at something sinister beneath the surface. The group's purpose was, on paper, little more than a social circle of ambitious, pure-blood students, but in practice, it was Riddle's first test of manipulation, hierarchy, and loyalty. Members included future Death Eaters, such as Bellatrix Black, Avery, and potentially Lucius Malfoy's father, Abraxas. They met in secret, often in the dungeons or unused classrooms, to discuss magical theory and forbidden topics, like Horcrux creation, subjects that most students wouldn't dare whisper about. After Riddle left Hogwarts, the Knights evolved into his first army. The polite name was shed in favor of the far more menacing Death Eaters, signaling the transition from ideology to violence. It's believed that the inner circle of the Death Eaters, those closest to Voldemort, were still privately referred to by the older name, as a mark of seniority and shared origin. Even the name, Walpurgis, itself carried layered meaning. In some folklore, Walpurgis Night marks when spirits roam freely, blurring the line between life and death. For a man obsessed with conquering mortality, it was a fitting metaphor. In essence, the Knights of Walpurgis were the prototype, Voldemort's testing ground for fear, obedience, and power. They were the first to call him Lord Voldemort instead of Tom, long before the rest of the world learned to fear that name. The Slug Club. The Slug Club was a semi-secret social circle founded and maintained by Professor Horace Slughorn during his tenure as Potions Master at Hogwarts. Unlike Dumbledore's army or the Order of the Phoenix, this group wasn't about rebellion or ideology. It was about connections. Slughorn gathered students he considered promising, which usually meant talented, famous, or well-connected. It was Hogwarts' version of elite networking, complete with lavish desserts and backroom career opportunities. Members over the years included Tom Riddle, Lily Evans, Severus Snape, and later Hermione Granger, Harry Potter, and Ginny Weasley. Slughorn's dinners featured conversations ranging from Quidditch to ministry politics. Invitations were highly selective, and rejections were rare enough to sting. Behind the charm, however, there was strategy. Slughorn's club functioned as a long-term investment. He built influence by nurturing relationships with future politicians, Quidditch stars, and even dark wizards, if they showed potential. Tom Riddle was one of his prized pupils. Before that pride turned into lifelong guilt. After Voldemort's rise, Slughorn went into hiding, ashamed of the role he played in encouraging Riddle's ambition. The Slug Club wasn't technically secret, but its exclusivity made it feel that way. Many students didn't even know when or where the meetings occurred, as the invitations were delivered discreetly, and the guest list kept intentionally vague. It was also one of the few Hogwarts traditions that survived multiple headmasters, reappearing whenever Slughorn returned to teach. Ironically, while Dumbledore's army trained fighters, and the Order built heroes, Slughorn's club produced power brokers. From politicians to potion masters, many of its alumni went on to shape wizarding society behind the scenes. In short, it was the wizarding world's version of an old boys club, with more amortentia fumes and fewer ethics. The Sacred 28. The Sacred 28 wasn't a group in the traditional sense, but it acted as a closed social network of Britain's most self-important pureblood families. In the 1930s, a book titled Pureblood Directory, aka Wizard Supremacy for Dummies, was anonymously published, claiming to identify the 28 true pureblood lineages untouched by Muggle heritage. The author is widely believed to have been Cantankerous Nott, an ancestor of Theodore Nott and a notorious blood purist. The list included names like the Malfoys, Blacks, Lestranges, and Yaxleys, families that would later supply many of Voldemort's earliest followers. Ironically, it also included the Weasleys, who were mocked by other purebloods for their ginger hair and for marrying Muggleborns. Those left off the list, like the Potters, were viewed with suspicion, despite being old wizarding families themselves. Though it wasn't an organized club, the Sacred 28 influenced wizarding politics and culture for decades. It created a hierarchy that determined marriages, school alliances, and ministry appointments. Pureblood families used the list as both a badge of pride and a political weapon, quietly coordinating through social events and arranged marriages to preserve their purity. As anyone with a purebred dog can tell you, however, there are consequences to such a shallow gene pool. By the time of the Second Wizarding War, its legacy was clear. The Death Eater's ideology was a direct descendant of the prejudices this list had codified. The Sacred 28 may not have worn masks or taken oaths, but they didn't need to. Their bigotry was baked into the foundation of wizarding society. The Snatchers. Just as Darth Vader was once forced to recruit underworld scum to help him track down his enemies, so too was Lord Voldemort. The Snatchers were an unofficial but highly organized network of bounty hunters operating during Voldemort's control of the Ministry of Magic in the Second Wizarding War. They weren't Death Eaters, at least not formally, but they worked alongside them for profit and protection. Their main task was to capture Muggleborns, fugitives, and anyone defying the new regime, in exchange for gold and favor from the Dark Lord's followers. The group rose to prominence after the Muggleborn Registration Commission was introduced, which forced Muggleborn witches and wizards to prove their right to possess magic. Those who couldn't were arrested, or worse. Snatchers patrolled the countryside, ambushing travelers, raiding safe houses, and combing through reports of magic being used outside authorized zones. The most infamous gang was led by Fenrir Greyback. Picture Boba Fett, if he were a sadistic werewolf. Fenrir served as both leader and muscle. His lieutenants included Scabior, a reckless and ambitious wizard, and a rotating cast of petty criminals and ex-ministry workers who had switched sides to survive. Their methods were unpredictable, sometimes brutal, sometimes bureaucratic. They'd use fake identification checks one day and full-scale ambushes the next. Snatchers often delivered their captives to the Muggleborn Registration Commission, or straight to Malfoy Manor, which served as Voldemort's temporary headquarters. Many of their prisoners were later killed, imprisoned in Azkaban, or forced to serve the Death Eater's cause. Ironically, despite serving the Dark Lord, most Snatchers weren't true believers. They were opportunists, men who saw chaos as a business model. Their downfall came near the end of the war, when Voldemort's collapse destroyed their protection network. After his death, the Hunters became the Hunted, as surviving Snatchers were tracked down and arrested by the reformed ministry. Some were executed, others imprisoned, and a few simply vanished, blending back into society. If the Death Eaters were Voldemort's army, the Snatchers were his bounty board, proof that evil doesn't just recruit zealots, it also hires mercenaries. The International Confederation of Wizards. The International Confederation of Wizards, often compared to a magical United Nations, is a governing body that unites wizarding authorities across the globe. It's not entirely secret, but its true inner workings are hidden behind layers of bureaucracy, diplomacy, and enchanted confidentiality. The organization regulates international magic law, secrecy, and intergovernmental relationships between magical communities. The Confederation dates back centuries, with its formation designed to coordinate magical governments after the Statute of Secrecy was signed in 1692. This treaty forced wizards to hide from muggles worldwide, and the Confederation became the body responsible for keeping that veil intact. It oversaw policies on cross-border apparition, the use of magical creatures, and even disputes between wizarding nations. At its head sits the Supreme Mugwump, the equivalent of a wizarding president. Albus Dumbledore held this title for many years, chosen for his reputation as a brilliant mediator. The Confederation's meetings take place at undisclosed international locations, possibly protected by magical displacement charms that prevent anyone, magical or not, from tracking their position. The group's influence extends further than most realize. During the Fantastic Beasts era, the Confederation organized the 1927 trial to decide whether Gellert Grindelwald would face execution, and it also approved the 1945 duel between Grindelwald and Dumbledore, which ended the wizarding conflict in Europe. It's been hinted that they oversee the Magical Congress of the United States, or MAC-USA, and similar ministries worldwide, serving as a neutral council that can overrule local magical governments if international secrecy is at risk. Its secrecy isn't born of malice, but necessity. Their decisions often involve covering up magical disasters, obliviating entire towns, or erasing creatures from Muggle records. The ordinary witch or wizard in Britain would have no idea who represents them there, or even when the next meeting occurs. The Confederation's members are sworn to confidentiality under threat of magical enforcement. In the end, while the Ministry of Magic pretends to run Britain, it's the International Confederation of Wizards quietly maintaining the fragile illusion that the magical world doesn't exist at all. The Scourers. The Scourers were a shadowy, violent faction of magical mercenaries that operated in 17th century North America, long before the establishment of MAC-USA, or the Magical Congress of the United States of America. Their story is one of the darkest in early wizarding history, and one that most American wizards prefer to forget. Originally, the Scourers were formed as bounty hunters, tasked with enforcing magical law across the colonies. But as settlers spread and government oversight weakened, the group went rogue. They began selling their services to the highest bidder, hunting not just criminals, but anyone with a wand who couldn't pay them off. They extorted families, exposed hidden wizards to muggles, and even participated in the infamous Salem witch trials, handing over their own kind to burn in return for payment. Their symbol was never officially recorded, but accounts describe them wearing long coats with hidden wand holsters and wielding weapons coated in both magical and mundane toxins. Their leader, known only as Josiah, was rumored to keep a ledger of every witch or wizard betrayed by his gang, a book said to curse anyone who read it. By the late 1600s, the Scourers' greed and brutality had established the magical community. Entire families fled underground, erasing their identities to escape persecution. When MAC-USA was founded in 1693, one of its first acts was to hunt down the Scourers. Some were executed, others disappeared into the wilderness. However, their legacy lived on through bloodlines. Many Scourers integrated back into no-mage society, spreading anti-magic sentiment that would resurface generations later in groups like the Second Salemers. In essence, the Scourers were the cautionary tale that defined American magical law, proof that secrecy wasn't just about hiding from muggles, but about protecting wizards from their own kind. Their existence explains why MAC-USA became so rigidly isolationist and paranoid in later centuries. Once you've seen wizards betray their world for profit, you stop trusting anyone with a badge and a wand. The Order of Merlin. The Order of Merlin is one of the oldest and most prestigious organizations in the wizarding world, dating back to the Middle Ages. It was founded by the legendary wizard Merlin himself, the same one who studied at Hogwarts under Salazar Slytherin's tutelage. The original purpose of the order was to uphold a code of honor among witches and wizards, promoting chivalry, fairness, and the responsible use of magic. Think of it as an ancient knighthood, if knights wore cloaks instead of armor and occasionally turned people into toads. Over the centuries, the order evolved from a moral fellowship into an award-granting institution, formally recognizing those who made outstanding contributions to magic. Today, the Order of Merlin, first class, is the wizarding equivalent of a knighthood or the Order of the British Empire. Functionally useless, but fun to lord over all the plebeians who will never receive one. It's awarded by the Ministry of Magic, typically for acts of great courage or service. Dumbledore, for instance, was a recipient for his defeat of Grindelwald in 1945. The order is divided into 3 classes. First class, awarded for acts of exceptional bravery or service to the wizarding world. Second class, for significant contributions to knowledge or magical innovation. Third class, often given for services to the ministry, a polite phrase for political loyalty, or, occasionally, sheer sycophancy. The order's headquarters and inner council are never described in detail, but it's implied that membership comes with political weight and ceremonial duties. Recipients attend private galas and are often invited to advise the Wizengamot, the wizarding high court. Interestingly, not all recipients have been noble. Cornelius Fudge received an Order of Merlin first class, mainly for being minister during stable times, which is like awarding someone for not crashing the car they were handed. Gilderoy Lockhart also famously received one for his services to the community, which turned out to be based entirely on stolen achievements. Despite this corruption, the Order of Merlin remains a respected symbol in wizarding culture. Its motto, Magna Bona Magia, Great Magic for the Greater Good, was later twisted by Grindelwald for his own cause, a grim reminder that even the purest institutions can be reinterpreted by those hungry for power. The Society for the Support of Squibs, or the SSS. The Society for the Support of Squibs was one of the strangest footnotes in wizarding history, a well-intentioned, yet deeply patronizing attempt to help non-magical people born into wizarding families. Founded sometime in the late 19th century, it aimed to provide Squibs with housing, basic education, and job opportunities, usually in menial or intermediary roles between the magical and muggle worlds. Its creation reflected an uncomfortable truth about wizarding society. For all its talk of progress, it had little tolerance for those without magic. Squibs were often treated as family embarrassments, hidden away or quietly sent to live among muggles. The society, therefore, functioned as a kind of halfway house, charitable in theory, but condescending in execution. Records from the Ministry's Department of Magical Welfare show that the society was headquartered in a converted townhouse somewhere in Diagon Alley, supposedly enchanted so that no witch or wizard with functioning magic could enter uninvited. Membership consisted mostly of wealthy purebloods who wanted to appear compassionate without actually mingling with those they were supporting. By the early 20th century, the society had largely faded into obscurity. Some historians believe it was absorbed into the Department of Magical Integration under the guise of public assistance. A few of its late beneficiaries may have included caretakers, shop assistants, and other non-magical workers quietly maintained by ministry stipends. Argus Filch's situation at Hogwarts, an unskilled squib employed in a magical environment, was likely a remnant of this policy. In short, the Society for the Support of Squibs was the wizarding world's version of performative charity, helping people just enough to make everyone else feel better about ignoring them. RAB and the Horcrux Rebellion. While not an organization in the formal sense, the actions of Regulus Arcturus Black and his loyal house elf Creature formed one of the most secret and heroic underground efforts in wizarding history. Regulus, the younger brother of Sirius Black, was once a loyal Death Eater. He joined Voldemort as a teenager, driven by family pride and the pureblood ideology drilled into him since childhood. But after witnessing Voldemort's cruelty firsthand, specifically the torture of Creature during the creation of a Horcrux, Regulus turned against him in silence. Operating completely alone, Regulus pieced together Voldemort's greatest secret, where his missing nose went. His immortality through Horcruxes. He deduced the existence of one hidden within a seaside cave, protected by enchantments that required the ingestion of a magical potion guarding the locket Horcrux. Knowing he'd never survive, Regulus ordered Creature to force him to drink the potion, retrieve the Horcrux, and escape, one of the few acts of self-sacrifice by a former Death Eater. Before his death, Regulus left a note inside a fake locket, signed RAB, vowing to destroy the Horcrux and end Voldemort's reign. Unfortunately, neither he nor Creature could destroy it. The note remained undiscovered until decades later, when Harry Potter and Dumbledore recovered the locket's hiding place. Creature's recollection of that night became one of the key revelations in the final war. In a sense, RAB and Creature represented a secret resistance within Voldemort's own ranks, a microscopic rebellion that predated the Order's knowledge of Horcruxes by nearly 20 years. Dumbledore never knew of it, nor did any surviving Death Eaters. Regulus died an enemy to both sides, but his discovery and sacrifice directly contributed to Voldemort's eventual downfall. No meetings, no passwords, no grand headquarters, just two unlikely conspirators, a cursed potion, and a single act of redemption hidden in the shadows of a collapsing ideology. The Secret Keepers and the Fidelius Charm Network. The Fidelius Charm isn't an organization in itself, but during the height of the First Wizarding War, it functioned like one. The spell allowed a single person, the Secret Keeper, to conceal crucial information within their soul, rendering it completely unknowable to anyone else unless the Keeper willingly revealed it. Which, come to think of it, is pretty much how all secrets work. During Voldemort's rise, several groups within the Order of the Phoenix used this charm to hide key locations, operating as small, silent cells of information where even allies didn't know one another's safe houses. The most famous example was the Potter's hiding place in Godric's Hollow. Albus Dumbledore cast the Fidelius charm, and James and Lily appointed Peter Pettigrew as their secret keeper. Pettigrew betrayed them to Voldemort, leading to their deaths. Who would have guessed that someone who could transform into a literal rat would end up being a metaphorical rat as well? What's less discussed is that Dumbledore himself served as secret keeper for several other safe houses, Grimmauld Place among them, making him one of the most heavily burdened individuals during the war, magically and mentally. A few other secret keepers are referenced indirectly in canon. Bathilda Bagshot supposedly held knowledge about Dumbledore's family, guarded in a similar fashion, though it's unclear if that was by magic or discretion. In the expanded Pottermore material, the Fidelius charm is said to be so powerful that even death doesn't necessarily reveal the secret. It dies with the keeper, unless shared beforehand. This made it both the ultimate defense and the ultimate liability. One weak link could expose an entire resistance network. During the Second Wizarding War, the use of the charm became more systematic. The Order implemented rotating secret keepers to decentralize risk, ensuring that no single betrayal could expose every member. In practical terms, it was the wizarding version of deep espionage protocol. Isolate information, encrypt it magically, and trust no one completely. The Fidelius Charm Network didn't have meetings, uniforms, or oaths, but in terms of keeping Voldemort guessing, it was one of the most effective underground systems ever used in the magical world. Until human error, as usual, ruined it. The unsanctioned inner circle of the International Confederation. While the International Confederation of Wizards functions as the global authority for magical law, there is persistent evidence, both textual and implied, that a smaller, unofficial inner circle operates behind the scenes. This wizard Illuminati is never named directly in any of J.K. Rowling's primary works, but its influence can be traced through the Confederation's actions and omissions. The Confederation is meant to operate democratically, representing magical governments from around the world. Yet, major decisions, such as the approval of the Statute of Secrecy or the political handling of Gellert Grindelwald's trial, were clearly made by a handful of senior figures, not the full council. Albus Dumbledore's tenure as Supreme Mugwump provides several clues. Despite his formal position, he referred to being pressured by certain parties within the Confederation who wanted stricter control over intercontinental magic travel and artifact regulation. These unnamed figures likely made up the Inner Circle. This hidden tier operated through discretion and delegation. Its members were drawn from the most powerful wizarding nations: Britain, France, the United States, and possibly Uganda, whose magical academies had strong international influence. The Circle's meetings took place privately after official sessions ended, and their rulings were passed to the larger Confederation as unanimous recommendations. Their motives weren't necessarily evil, at least not overtly. Like most elite shadow governments, the members of the Inner Circle simply thought they knew what was best for the simple, working-class witches and wizards. They viewed themselves as custodians of magical secrecy, preventing exposure or chaos. But their methods often blurred into authoritarianism, manipulating international votes, censoring reports of magical disasters, and even authorizing memory wipes on entire no-mage populations. In one account, preserved through the Daily Prophet International Edition, the Circle allegedly ordered the suppression of a 19th century magical plague outbreak in Northern Europe, fearing Muggle discovery. By the time of the Fantastic Beasts era, the Circle's fingerprints were everywhere. Grindelwald's imprisonment, Mac USA's isolationism, and the European Ministry's secrecy all tied back to this invisible network of power. Dumbledore himself hinted in correspondence that Too many decisions are made by too few wands. In short, the Confederation's inner circle was the ultimate wizarding shadow cabinet, an unacknowledged elite that decided the fate of magical society under the guise of international diplomacy. Not officially evil, not officially good, just officially unaccountable. The Scourer descendants and the Second Salemers. Centuries after the Scourers' downfall, their legacy resurfaced in a new and disturbingly familiar form, the Second Salemers. This extremist no-mage group appeared in the early 20th century, claiming that witches and wizards were still secretly living among ordinary people and corrupting society. Publicly, they were a fringe religious movement. Privately, they were a direct ideological descendant of the Scourers, kept alive through bloodlines and inherited paranoia. The group's leader, Mary Lou Barebone, was a descendant of Scourer families who had renounced magic and passed down an obsessive hatred of it. She founded the New Salem Philanthropic Society, a seemingly charitable organization that distributed leaflets, held rallies, and adopted orphaned children, all while preaching that witchcraft was real and must be eradicated. Beneath the surface, however, Mary Lou's home functioned as a cult headquarters. Her followers wore identical dark clothing, lived under strict rules, and carried pamphlets accusing government officials of harboring wizards. The Second Salemers movement reached its peak in 1926, during the events of Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, when Credence Barebone, Mary Lou's adopted son, was revealed to be an Obscurial, a magical child whose repressed powers had turned violent. Their witch-hunting campaign inadvertently caused one of the largest magical crises in American history, exposing the existence of magic to countless no-mages and nearly destroying MAC-USA's secrecy laws. Despite their brief public collapse after that incident, the ideology persisted. The Second Salemers weren't just anti-magic, they were anti-truth, and had they existed in the 21st century, probably would have been anti-science and anti-vax as well. Their group thrived on fear and misinformation, occasionally resurfacing in anti-magical propaganda during later decades. MAC-USA spent years covering up the group's activities, erasing their records and memory wiping anyone connected to them. But their existence marked a key point in wizarding history, proof that magical secrecy didn't just protect wizards from muggles, it also protected muggles from the consequences of their own hysteria. The Goblin Rebellions. The Goblin Rebellions weren't a single event, but a long chain of uprisings that shook the foundations of the wizarding world for centuries. They were organized by goblin leaders who demanded such unreasonable concessions as equal rights, wand ownership, and control over the treasure and artifacts they crafted. Rights consistently denied by the Ministry of Magic. Each rebellion was brutally suppressed, and then conveniently rewritten in wizarding history books to make goblins look violent and unreasonable. The first major recorded rebellion took place in 1612, centered around Hogsmeade, where goblins occupied the local inn. Later known as the Three Broomsticks, other uprisings followed in 1671, 1752, and several smaller revolts across Europe. Though the ministry claimed victory each time, the repeated rebellions reveal that the real issue was never resolved. Goblins remained second-class citizens in a world built on their labor. Leaders like Urg the Unclean, Ragnuk I, and later Ranrock, during the 1800s conflict explored in Hogwarts Legacy, organized their movements through underground channels. Their communication system was a marvel of magical secrecy, encoded banking ledgers, enchanted coin deliveries, and messages disguised as transaction records between Gringotts branches. These networks made the goblins' operations nearly impossible for the ministry to track. While wizards framed the rebellions as violent uprisings, many were strategic protests and economic strikes. Goblins demanded recognition of their craftsmanship, arguing that wizarding ownership of goblin-made objects expired upon the owner's death. This dispute over property rights was the spark for countless conflicts and centuries of distrust. By the 19th century, most goblin movements had gone underground, their leaders operating in the shadows. Even within Gringotts, whispers persisted of a hidden vault council, a small group that quietly funneled profits from goblin-run vaults into secret resistance funds. In the end, the Goblin Rebellions weren't just about wands or gold, they were about sovereignty. And while wizards claim to have won, history suggests the goblins simply stopped fighting in ways the ministry could see. And that covers every hidden faction, secret order, and shadow network operating in the wizarding world. From Dumbledore's resistance to Voldemort's fanatics, and even the bureaucrats who quietly ruled them all from behind the curtain. But here's the thing. None of these organizations could have existed without the individuals powerful enough to shape them. The duelists, the inventors, the legends whose magic rewrote history itself, as well as the bloodthirsty tyrants said legends were forced to take up arms against. So, if you want to see exactly who stood at the top of the wizarding hierarchy, those rare witches and wizards whose power changed the course of the entire magical world, then join me in the next video, where we break down the most powerful witches and wizards of all time.